On the night of November 17th of 1978, Kirk Thompson made plans to walk with his friend Mark Flemmonds to their homes from Mark's job, but Mark was nowhere to be found. Kirk checked around the area but saw no signs of Mark and walked home alone. Mark's body, along with 3 other co-workers, were found in a wooded area just 2 days later. So what happened? Who did this? And was this just a robbery gone wrong? Stick around as we discuss this unsolved case of Mark Flemmonds. Mark Sylvester Flemmonds was born on December 31st of 1961 to Robert and Blondell Flemmonds. Mark was blessed with 7 siblings, with Mark being the youngest. Mark was described as funny and very friendly. Being raised in a devout Jehovah's Witness household, Mark always had a close relationship with his family. Mark attended Speedway High School in Speedway, Indiana. Although Mark had a few struggles academically in school during his freshman year, he managed to conquer his struggles months later and would pass on to his sophomore year in high school. Mark's father, Robert, would notice how hard Mark worked in school and would allow Mark to take on a job working at Burger Chef, which was close enough for Mark to walk back and forth to work. On November 17th of 1978, Mark had the day off but agreed to work for a fellow employee named Ginger Anderson that day. Mark informed one of his friends named Kirk that he would be working that night and that they could walk home together after work. Kirk heads over to Burger Chef after closing time. As Kirk walks over to the restaurant across the street, he observes 2 men inside of the restaurant behind the counter. But by the time Kirk made it across the street to the restaurant, the 2 men were gone. As Kirk gets closer, Kirk notices cars still in the parking lot and the back door open, but no one was found inside. So Kirk decided to walk home alone. Another witness, George Nichols, and his girlfriend would go by Dunkin' Donuts to smoke. They were approached by 2 men, informing them to leave due to vandalism in the area. Another witness, Brian Crane, who was also an employee of Burger Chef, took the night off to take out Ginger, who Mark was working for that night, would drive past the Burger Chef and notice Jane, who was the manager that evening's car, was not there, but noticed the lights on inside but sees no one inside. Brian drops off Ginger at home, then heads back over to the Burger Chef. Like Kirk, Brian notices the back door ajar and notices the safe opened, then calls the store manager. The manager advises Brian to call the police. Around 12:15 a.m., the police arrive at the Burger Chef. It would be reported that 2 purses were left behind, along with some of the employees' jackets. The police would also find 2 empty currency bags and an empty roll of adhesive tape next to the open safe. The police did not initially consider the case to be serious, given that management reported the loss of approximately $581 from the safe and no clear signs of a struggle. Just petty theft by the employees that night to go partying that night. Jane, who was the manager that night, had a 1974 Chevrolet Vega missing from the parking lot. The police ultimately take a report but did not process the scene as a crime scene, so the restaurant was seemingly cleaned and was open the next day. Later in the morning, around 4 a.m., the police would find Jane's 1974 Chevy Vega abandoned in a park, not far from the Speedway police station. The car is unlocked and indicates foul play. On November 19th of 1978, 2 people were out hiking in Johnson County, which is just south of Indianapolis, came across 4 bodies in a wooded area. The bodies would be later identified. as Jane Freet, Daniel Davis, Ruth Shelton, and Mark Flemmonds were all employees working at Burger Chef that night. Daniel and Ruth were found lying side by side, face down, shot multiple times in the head, neck, and shoulders by a .38 caliber firearm. Jane was found a few yards away, stabbed twice in the heart with a broken off knife still in her body. Mark had blunt force trauma, died from choking on his own blood. It was possible that he was beaten and at some point ran into a tree. In the time after the bodies were found, the authorities had the description of two men who were seen at the restaurant. As a result, composite sketches and clay busts were made. However, with the many theories out there and with very little evidence in the case would go cold. But in 1981, the authorities heard from a man named Alan Pruitt who claimed to have information in regards to the quadruple homicide. Alan remembers seeing two men, Jeff Freed and Tim Willoughby, taking 4 employees in their van and Jane's Chevy Vega. At the time, Alan stated that Jeff slammed Mark's head into the van. Days after the disappearance, Alan remembers hanging out with the two men, in addition to Tim's girlfriend at the time, named Mary Ann Higginbotham. The 4 drove around in the van, and Alan claimed that Mary rambled about Tim and Jeff taking the lives of the Burger Chef employees. The two also asked Alan about what he saw the previous night. The group then ended up in an isolated area, then got out of the car. Alan would then state that Mary asked him to run because they planned to not only take her life, but his as well. As Alan ran away, he heard gunshots. About 7 months after the Burger Chef incident, Mary was found fatally shot in a barrel. However, Alan's story would often change over time, and with no concrete evidence tying either Jeff or Tim to the murders, the case remained unsolved. In 1984, Donald Forrester, who was serving time at the Pendleton Correctional Facility, would confess to the Burger Chef homicides of Daniel Davis and Ruth Shelton. Donald would claim that they were the result of a drug debt. Donald would go on to tell the police that James Freet, Jane Freet's brother, owed money to someone because of a drug deal. He claimed that James and 3 others had gone to Burger Chef to threaten Jane. According to Donald, shortly after they arrived, he confronted Jane. Mark intervened in an attempt to protect her, and that's when a fight broke out. Mark was knocked to the ground during the fight after hitting his head on the car's bumper. It was assumed that Mark was deceased, so they kidnapped and took the lives of the rest of the employees to ensure no witnesses were left behind. In March of 1981, James was arrested on drug charges. However, he denied any involvement in his sister's homicide and was never arrested in connection to the Burger Chef homicides. Donald's account would change over time, and some of the information did not add up to the details in the quadruple homicide. The police came to the conclusion that Donald was only looking for a shorter sentence as he was serving 95 years in prison. But in 2006, Donald passed away in prison from cancer. He was 55 years of age. In 2018, the police released a photo of a knife blade around 4.5 inches long, hoping it could inspire someone to come forward with any information. After over 40 years, this case still remains unsolved. There has been many coverages on the Burger Chef murders, but I wanted to highlight Mark Flemmonds as he was one of the youngest victims in this quadruple homicide. So what do you all think? Do you believe other people's accounts of what happened that night? The confession? Have any of you heard of this case? Please share your thoughts in the comments, as this case is truly devastating. 4 employees losing their life over a robbery? Or was it something more personal? Could it have been someone who may have targeted this specific location? But if anyone has any information that can be of help to this case, the information will be linked in the description box. As always, thank you for spending some of your time here at the True Crime Spot. We'll see you in the next video.